Sophie, when you're ready, I think we can probably get started. We've got a good group available.
Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone, dear speakers. It's really a pleasure for me to moderate this session today. My name is Sophie Job, and I'm Advocacy Manager at Speak Up Africa, based in Dakar, Senegal. And I'm sharing this session with experts on water, hygiene, and sanitation issues, but in general on gender issues and women empowerment. Please, Christy, if you can show the agenda. I will just go over the agenda and over the objectives, and just after that, we can introduce our speakers. What do we'll have on 1 hour and 20-minute sessions. In terms of agenda, we'll have a quick overview, and we will share just after the initial pool and how you can access to this pool. We will have a brief co-convener presentations. We have during this session, a representative from Global Water Challenge, Sesame Workshop, WaterAid, World Vision, Emory University, and at the end, we will have a discussion and Q&A session where you will have the possibility to ask directly question if you want, or if you can just write the question on the chat box. Slide, please. In terms of objectives, we have 3 main objectives. The first one is to understand the current knowledge and research about the empowerment of women and girls through WASH. The second one is to explore existing metrics and innovation in measuring empowerment. And the last one is to understand different implementation tools and approach to support a move to a gender transformative WASH. Just let me introduce the speakers we have today. We have Madeleine Flamick. She's a woman empowerment portfolio manager at Global Water Challenge, where she manages a diverse portfolio of empowerment initiatives across several key public-private partnerships focused on global water stewardship. She serves as a program manager for Global Water Challenge, Clean Water and Women's Empowerment Action Platform, Women for Waters, as well as the New World Program in partnership with the Coca-Cola Foundation. We also have Kim Foltz. She's the Vice President, Content Research and Evaluation at the Sesame Workshop. She oversees research and evaluation on Sesame Workshop, co-productions and community engagement interventions across the globe. We have also Julie Truelove, is a water sanitation and hygiene specialist based in Canada, focused on policy advocacy and program development. Julie collaborates extensively with civil society organizations to position WASH as the pathway to gender equality and empowerment of women and girls in Canada feminist policy, including menstrual hygiene and health, nutrition, gender dimension of WASH in healthcare, and WASH for climate resilience. We have Pamela Mwelela Shizanga. She works as country director for WaterAid Zambia. She has been with WaterAid as country director since January 26. She also previously worked for WaterAid as head of policy and programs from 22 to 25. Pamela is a development practitioner with over 20 years experience in the development sector. We have Christy Urich. She's a WASH Technical Director with World Vision United States. She has worked with the WASH team for more than 9 years, and also she has worked with World Vision for 16 years. We have Dr. Sheila Sinharoy. She is an assistant professor in the Huber Department of Global Health at the Rollins School of Public Health at Emory University. Her research focused on 3 main areas: environmental health, nutrition, and gender, and she's particularly interested with the interaction of these 3 topics. We also have Madhu Rajesh. She's a senior director for water and agriculture at Coca-Cola. In her role, Madhu helps drive progress against the company's environmental, social, and governance goal, focusing on 2030 water security strategy and sustainable agriculture sourcing globally. And Madhu will really help us to summarize the discussion and just highlight the key point of discussion we have today. Slide, please. Okay, perfect. As I presented earlier, we have a poll. You can go to the platform. You just have to click on the polls. You just have to click on polls, and the main idea is to put on these polls all of the key information in terms of where entity do you represent, who you are, and also we have a second poll where you can put the years of experiences you have on JC, and you can have the possibility to answer and to share the key information over the session, and at the end we will have just a brief session just in order to go over the response and see if the key points you highlight. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to write the question on the chatbot. Just for your information, JZ is gender equality and social inclusion. Okay, I think now we can begin the discussion, because as you know, many actions have been undertaken to empower women and girls in the world, including the provision of sanitary pads, the construction of toilets adapted to the need of women, but also a strong advocacy for the presence of women in decision-making bodies. And in reality, despite all of this action and undertaken, we must emphasize the fact that women empowerment issues must go beyond the construction of sanitation infrastructure. And today, we are meeting to discuss how we can put in place innovative approach based on reliable data. And when we talk about beyond access, we are talking about bringing focus and intention to reaching the most vulnerable in WASH, including people with disabilities, for example. This general includes issue of gender equality, disability inclusion as a marginalized group, and work in fragile contexts. And beyond access, we reinforce the rich and sustainable impact of infrastructure efforts, emphasizing do not harm principle, influencing positive social norms and behavior change, and participatory and inclusive design. And during this session, we will really have the possibility to go deeper on all of these notions, and the key speakers will have the possibility to share what they put in place in order to empower women in general on the WASH sector. Just let me introduce Madeleine Fleming from Global Water Challenges. She will
Sorry, Sophie, to interrupt. Maybe we can introduce the Pathable first so people can interact while they're hearing the presenters.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. You see the Padlet, and what you just have to do is to click and just add the key information you have. The first one is around successes and challenges around implementation policy funding related to gender transformative programming. If you have key highlights you want to share, you can just put it directly. The second one is how are you framing water as a catalyst for empowerment and broader social challenges? You can also add, and we have how we can better address WASH need across the life cycle, particularly as related to women and girls. We also have one question around how we better conduct gender and power analysis and allow finding from this analysis influence what we do. And the last one is how can we propose this work forward, motivate donor funding, put learning data into practice. You just have to use the experience you have and the key information you have just in order to share the key ideas. And we can discuss broader on that when we will have the session on the Padlet. Okay, perfect. Madeleine, over to you, please.
Thank you, Sophie. Hello, everyone. My name is Madeleine Flamick. I serve as the Women's Empowerment Portfolio Manager at Global Water Challenge, working on the nexus of clean water access and gender, based here in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area in the U.S. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. Global Water Challenge is a coalition of leading organizations committed to achieving UN SDG 6, universal access to safe drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene, or WASH, as we're all familiar with, specifically with a focus on equitable access to empower women and girls. Since 2006, GWC's 50+ multi-sector partners have improved WASH service delivery for over 2 million people across 39 countries globally. Next slide, please. Following years of designing and managing WASH programs worldwide, GWC consistently saw a strong connection between water access and sustainable development outcomes for both gender equity and community upliftment. To further investigate this linkage, GWC partnered with the Coca-Cola Foundation, USAID, Ipsos, through the Water and Development Alliance, or WADA, to understand the unique connection between improved water access and women's empowerment. This group supported the Ripple Effect study. The Ripple Effect study was primarily broken up into 3 phases. Phase 1 included conducting a landscape review of existing data related to the linkage between water and women's empowerment, as well as an analysis of the programs that we were already supporting, specifically those supported through the Coca-Cola Foundation, both WADA and the Replenish Africa Initiative, or another acronym, RAIN. And as part of this first phase, we developed the global theory of change to be tested and confirmed in phase 2. The global theory of change stated that water uniquely catalyzes a shift towards women taking greater control of their lives at a personal, household, and community level, which then in turn impacts their communities. In phase 2, we focused on conducting performance assessments across both the RAIN and the WADA project portfolios, specifically in 3 countries in Africa, Rwanda, Eswatini, and Nigeria. And alongside Ipsos, we developed research instruments, which were used to collect both qualitative and quantitative data in project communities, analyzing water's impacts on women's empowerment. Ultimately, in phase 3, we developed a monitoring and evaluation framework, including qualitative and quantitative metrics to capture the impacts that water has on economic empowerment related outcomes. Next slide, please. So the Ripple Effect study identified 8 key pathways to empowerment, or deemed Ripple Effect, that capture the multiple ways in which water access impacts women, specifically in vulnerable communities. These are nutrition, education, time savings, income, safety and security, health, leadership and skills, and shifting roles and norms. While all of the pathways were impactful, the one that was specifically was interesting was the time savings piece. This was cross-cutting and a key enabling factor for us to look into. Specifically, the study showed that over 47% of the women involved were able to devote time saved, no longer having to travel long distances to collect water, towards pursuing income-generating opportunities and entrepreneurship. Also, over 90% of the women who used their time saved to pursue income-generating opportunities and entrepreneurial activities reported increased income. With these findings, GWC then developed the Ripple Effect Study Toolkit with Ipsos and with USAID in support from the Coca-Cola Foundation to make these findings of the Ripple Effect Study actionable for development practitioners globally. GWC has also incorporated these findings into our many corporate WASH programs as well. Next slide, please. Specifically, as a longstanding partner of Global Water Challenge, we have supported the Coca-Cola Company and broader system with their water-related programming. As part of the Coca-Cola Company's 5x20 initiative to enable 5 million women by 2020, also known as 5x20, GWC worked alongside the Coca-Cola Company and external assurance teams to integrate this time savings pathway into their 5x20 methodology. By doing so, GWC was able to successfully capture the enablement and empowerment of over 400,000 women through its water-related programming with the Coca-Cola system, specifically through RAIN and WADA. Next slide, please. Now, grounded on the ripple effect study, GWC took these findings from the study further and developed our own Women for Water platform that is aimed to mobilize collective action for clean water access for every woman and her community. Currently, Women for Water is scaling impact in 26 countries across the Americas, Africa, Middle East, and Europe. And we work to measurably contribute to economic empowerment outcomes, not only for NGO partners, for corporate partners as well, while raising awareness for the issue through brands, influencers, and consumers. Next slide, please. So the ripple effect study findings are reflected in all of GWC's WASH programming, specifically working to support income generation while improving health, food security, education, and climate resilience for communities. Below are some examples of project types that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And beyond GWC, as mentioned, the ripple effect study continues to provide multi-sector organizations with tools and metrics to identify high impact interventions and better communicate the positive ways in which improved water access really impacts women and subsequently their communities as well. I know that there has been some links shared in the chat already, and certainly look forward to receiving any questions towards the end of the session. And with that, I will pass it over to my colleague, Kim Folds, with Sesame Workshop to discuss Wash Up, the Girl Talk program. Thank you.
Thanks, Madeline. Hi, everyone. As has been mentioned, I'm Kim Folds. I'm Vice President of Content Research at Sesame Workshop. Sesame Workshop, some of you may not be familiar with, is the nonprofit behind the American children's TV show Sesame Street, as well as our global mass media and community engagement work. And I'm going to share a bit more about Wash Up Girl Talk, our partnership with World Vision. If we could jump to the next slide. So Girl Talk is it integrates menstrual health management education into an existing Wash Up curriculum. And Wash Up curriculum is our intervention that supports children, early primary children, in knowledge and healthy hygiene behavior practices. Girl Talk is the next evolution of that for late primary education, roughly students ages 10 to 14 in primary school. We've piloted it in Zimbabwe in 150 schools, and how Wash Up Girl Talk works. Raya, the Muppet on the previous slide, is our Wash Up champion. In Girl Talk, we meet Dee Dee, the purple Muppet in the middle of the picture on the bottom right. She is Raya's older sister. She's 14 years old and she's an MHM expert, and she teaches all of us about puberty and menstruation. Wash Up Girl Talk, as Sophie mentioned, there's a need to move beyond infrastructure, and Wash Up Girl Talk, through our partnership with World Vision, really brings together infrastructure and education to support long-standing behavior change. The program is facilitated over 10 weeks. Each session is 60 minutes long. Every other session, boys and girls attend together. Every other session, girls attend only. The materials include activity books, videos, Pico projectors, which are battery-operated machines that allow projection of the videos on any blank wall, flashcards and materials for making reusable menstrual pads to really highlight the value of engaging multimedia content. You can jump to the next slide. So our goals for Girl Talk had both short and long term. Immediately, we wanted to increase facilitators, boys and girls' knowledge and practice of healthy hygiene behaviors. We also wanted to support facilitators' knowledge about the importance of adequate water and sanitation facilities for learners, particularly girls. We wanted to, of course, increase girls' confidence in managing their own menstruation. And ultimately, a longer-term goal was a decrease in girls' school absenteeism and dropout rates. We conducted an evaluation focusing on the first and third outcome, because those are the shorter-term ones, knowing that we wanted to keep our eye on the second and fourth, which are much more long-term outcomes. If we jump to the next slide. So a quasi-experimental evaluation of Girl Talk, we found it had significant impact on students' knowledge about puberty and menstruation. We found significant increases in students' knowledge of puberty and menstruation, again, both girls and boys. We found that Girl Talk improved young women's practical knowledge of their menstrual cycles, and you can see the effect sizes here, which are quite large, much larger than we were expecting. Girl Talk helped dispel several common myths in the communities about menstruation. These are largely myths that really serve to marginalize girls and women and keep them out of public and social life. And then, while not as large, I think the most powerful finding was about talking about puberty and menstruation, really to push on this destigmatization of these topics. We found that students and facilitators reported an increase in talking about puberty and menstruation at school with their teachers and at home with their mothers. Conversely, we found a drop in students who reported not talking about either of these topics at school or at home. And there is, Sydney, if you wouldn't mind sharing the reference that is listed on the bottom, our evaluation partners from EDC recently published the results and making session. And then outside of a girls' latrine, a water tank, these are latrines and water tanks that World Vision has built, that then the school decorated using their own funds, and the message on the water tank said, "Let's talk about menstruation in our community." We can go to the next slide. So some emerging learnings that I think are relevant for our conversation today really focus on participatory design and community buy-in. We have found historically at Sesame, and it certainly was coming out very clearly with Girl Talk, that the power of multimedia and Muppets to discuss taboo subjects is really, really critical. It allows and creates a safe space for us to talk about things that are typically uncomfortable or may not necessarily be culturally appropriate at that moment, because it becomes developmentally appropriate, it becomes culturally contextualized, and there's also a sort of a distance when it's Muppets talking about it versus humans. Conducting multiple rounds of formative research was very, very critical. We learned a lot from the children themselves, from facilitators, and from the World Vision team to ensure that the content reflected where the community was, where they needed to go, as well as where some areas where we shouldn't approach, particularly around myths. That was a really challenging area for us to explore, and formative research really highlighted that. We also have, Sydney, if you wouldn't mind posting the other link, we have a recent publication that highlights some of that process and learnings as well. Engaging community groups. This wasn't originally part of the design, but it became very clear that any sort of future scale up, it was critical. Even though this was a school-based intervention, the community groups outside of the school, as well as those who were connected with the school, became critical to the success of it, even if engaged in an ad hoc way. Mother support groups, for example, became critical to larger community buy-in, because as you can imagine, in the beginning, there was some resistance from the community in having their children talk about menstruation and puberty. Relatedly, it also became an income generating activity for mother support groups and other mothers, as mothers took the patterns for the reusable pads, made them themselves, and sold them in the market. So exploring other ways to have community support was critical for this work, and would certainly be critical in any future design. And then the fourth element is creating space for boys and men to actively support and participate in girls and women's empowerment programming. Also has to be part of the program. What was interesting is that we created a demand for content around menstruation for boys. Boys were, we heard from teachers fairly regularly that they were frustrated at the sessions that were girls only, and girls were not interested in giving up their girls only space. But also we created that demand. It was interesting. So how can we leverage that? How can you create space for boys and men to be allies when talking about MHM and other girls and women's empowerment programming? And so that was the brief version of Girl Talk, and thank you for your time. I'm happy to hand it over to my colleagues Julie and Pamela from WaterAid. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kim. So yes, I'm Julie Truelove with WaterAid based in Canada. And so really, as we look to move beyond access, WaterAid is really looking at integrated approaches for WASH that genuinely reach across marginalized populations and across multiple dimensions of inequality. And so we have specifically prioritized gender equality as one of our 4 approaches that underpins all of our work towards a new 10-year global strategy. So next slide, please. So aligned with this priority, There we go. So aligned with this priority is we're launching new global guidance on integrating gender equality into WASH projects. And this is done in collaboration with Coca-Cola, Diageo, and WaterAid, and including companion resources for both NGOs and for companies. And so this was really for the audience to understand the drivers and benefits of taking this integrated approach across what are often distinct strategic commitments, maybe around gender equality and water. And so we just really wanted to bring these things together in a cohesive tool that can be used to demonstrate how these things can be done. And just noting as well, on August 30th, there's a talk show session specific to the guidance. So please do join that if you can. So next slide, please. And so just some brief reflections from the Canadian context and with WaterAid Canada. So we've continued to advocate for WASH as a pathway to gender equality across the action areas of Canada's feminist international assistance policy. And this includes health and human dignity, economic growth, and climate action as well. And so importantly as well, water collection has been noted in the guidance from Global Affairs Canada on the burden of unpaid work and care experienced by women and girls. And so this unpaid care work and burden of unpaid care work has provided us with another entry point for integration across sectors, and really the importance of engaging men and boys, as Kim was just talking about as well, engaging men and boys to achieve gender equality and universal access to WASH. I'm going to stop there and I will pass to my colleague Pamela for the remainder. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Julie, and good evening from Lusaka. I'm going to talk very briefly about a project that we have implemented in Lusaka, Zambia, where we have tried to address a number of aspects related to gender within our WASH programs. It is a sanitation project where we initially started by doing a research on sanitation financing. We were really trying to look at how we can address the challenge of financing for sanitation, particularly in the peri-urban areas. From this research, we were able to see that one of the challenges that the community faced was the lack of income for them to be able to pay for sanitation facilities. The commercial utility in the city of Lusaka had a program where they were providing low-cost sanitation solutions to communities, but many of the communities were not able to access due to a low income. So as a response to this, we decided to work with various women's groups that we were already interacting with in the community. But up until this point, their role really was to look at how they would participate in increasing access and sustaining some of the facilities that were installed in the communities. So together with these groups of women, we decided to look at how we can then help them to be able to raise money that they could then use to pay for the toilets. So we initiated a number of activities, initially small income generating activities here and there, but the women came back and said, some of these things we've been doing over and over and we haven't really made much progress. And so the idea of having a place where these women could consistently and continually undertake their economic empowerment activities was mooted, and we worked with them to develop what we are calling green spaces. In these spaces as well, the idea was to address other issues within the community, such as waste management. And so the green spaces essentially utilize the garbage that is collected from the community to do things like sack gardening, where the women produce vegetables and other things that they not only consume, but they also sell to raise income. They also have been able to use the plastic waste for a number of things, creating artifacts, but as well making containers where they do things like producing organic fertilizer, because the whole project is also premised on organic growing of vegetables and other agriculture activities. So we were able to do that with them. And based on this, we were then able to pre-finance the sanitation facilities with the commercial utilities, and the women are at the moment using that the income that they get to start repaying back the loan. And this goes into a revolving fund that will then pay for other toilets for other women, and they can pay back over a period of time. So the commercial utility would like to get an upfront payment for the facilities So we financed the initial one, and then the women have continued with that, using the revolving fund for others to be able to benefit. So the first cycle ends this year, and out of that first cycle, we want to see how many of the other women will be able to benefit. So far, the project benefited about 1,400 households that were able to put up the sanitation facilities. Next slide. So one of the other things that we have tried to do with the women is to look at other opportunities or identify other opportunities where they can be brought on board. We have another project that we've been implementing with stakeholders to provide hand washing facilities in schools. In the previous phase of the project, we were engaging contractors to do this work to install the hand washing facilities. What we then decided to do was to then work with the women, identify the women that could be trained, and took them to an institution of higher learning where we had an agreement with the institution to do the training for the women, which really motivated the women because this is the largest institution of higher learning in the country. And they were able to go to this facility to be trained to make these hand washing facilities that they were then able to install in 150 schools in the city that were targeted under this different project. So over the years, I think what we have also been trying to do, particularly the last few years, is to look at how we can be able to address various aspects that come through from the various activities that we implement. With the onset of COVID, we also did a vulnerability assessment. And one of the key issues that came out from the women was the risk of high levels of gender-based violence, of young girls getting married. And so what we then did to address that was to work with other organizations to set up legal help desks at the water facilities because this community has a lot of communal water points. So we set up legal help desks and worked with another organization that then provided the service for the women and the girls to be able to get any support that they required, whether legal or counseling services. So with each activity that we do, we try to look for opportunities where we can work with other organizations because other organizations are better placed maybe to provide the support and have the capacity. So we partner with others to be able to address some of the challenges that may be beyond WASH. I'll hand back to Judy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pamela. I think it's back to Christy now as well. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Pamela and Julie, and all the other presenters as well. As Sophie said at the beginning, my name is Urick. I am a technical director on the WASH team at World Vision based here in the United States, and I'll be sharing a bit about our efforts to apply more GESI or gender equality and social inclusion transformative approaches in our WASH work, specifically through a new program we have called Strong Women, Strong World. Really, you know, our history in WASH and a lot of other water-related organizations is very access oriented, right? Which is very important, very foundational, very essential, something we still need to be applying effort and investing in. And it's very photogenic, as you can see from this picture, you know, drills in the sunrise and, you know, beautiful photos of water coming out of the ground and children drinking clean water, which is beautiful and necessary. I think we've realized though, as an organization, and I think many have, as you're hearing from others today, that we really need to be going beyond access. And we need to be building on that access as a foundation so that we're taking approaches that are more empowering and particularly focusing on those who are most vulnerable and most affected by these impacts of WASH-related impacts in particular. So at World Vision, we organize our work into a 5-year business plan. So just kind of helps us orient ourselves toward, you know, incremental targets. Our most recent business plan, which started in 2021, really takes an effort to go a little bit deeper into some of these more transformative approaches to WASH and to pull us beyond our focus on access. And where you really see programs like Strong Women, Strong World fall into place in our efforts for more Jessie transformative approaches to WASH is really in goal 2, which you see circled on the screen here, which is in alignment with World Vision's mandate to serve the most vulnerable, to focus as an organization writ large. And it's something that we're really trying to apply more deeply in our WASH programming. And that includes work in fragile contexts, reaching the most poor, the poorest of the poor, and also people of the most socially marginalized people, often women and girls, people with disabilities, and other socially marginalized groups. So what is Strong Women, Strong World specifically? So it is not World Vision's only effort to apply Jessie and WASH, but it is a very concentrated programmatic effort to apply and learn Jessie and WASH, and particularly in integrating with other sectors of World Vision. If you know World Vision at all, we are a multi-sectoral organization. WASH is one of our core sectors, but we also do education, economic empowerment, etc. So Strong Women, Strong World focuses on the empowerment of women and girls through the intentional integration of WASH and economic empowerment. So we're not necessarily designing a whole new set of activities. We're really looking at what are the core activities that are part of our WASH programming, part of our economic empowerment programming, and how do we better sequence those and target those to have a greater impact on empowerment. We're also integrating microfinance where that's available and appropriate. We have a World Vision as a microfinance subsidiary called Vision Fund that we're collaborating with in 3 out of the 4 countries where we're operating. Our initial focus countries, as you can see here, are Guatemala, Honduras, Kenya, and Zimbabwe. And World Vision has Jessie as a strategic priority as an organization and applying that in our programs. And so through this, we're hoping to really articulate and refine that focus in WASH. So the way World Vision articulates Jessie has a lot of similarities to things that have already been shared. We might use some different words, but very similar concepts in terms of the types of domains we seek to apply in our efforts toward more transformative or Jessie transformative programs. So there's access, participation, decision-making, systems, and well-being. Those are sort of the 5 domains we seek to ensure are present in increasing depth in our programs. And we believe that those 5 domains contribute toward empowerment, transformation, and agency. Similar to WaterAid, actually, we are working to apply these principles in our own WASH-specific guidance for Jessie. I had hoped to have a final version to share today. It's not quite ready, but if you're interested, just send me a note in the chat and I'll get your email and I can send it to you when it's ready, hopefully in the next few weeks. But we're making a similar effort to put some programmatic guidance together. And that's going to be an iterative versioning of a document. So the Strong Women, Strong World program, I think, is going to really help us to continue to refine and learn as we go along. Specifically within this program, our theory of change, I don't want to share the whole log frame with you, but I thought I'd share a couple of high-level aims of this program. So within our theory of change, we say that if women and girls have an increased share in the business environment, both formal and informal, economic empowerment, if they have increased opportunities to advance their personal growth and well-being, if they're well educated, and if they share equally in decision making for their families and communities, then women and girls will be empowered. Empowerment is built on the foundation of safe WASH and economic opportunities and is reinforced by principles of access, participation, decision making, systems, and well-being. So all of the activities and aim and outputs and outcomes and things in our project are really hoping to contribute toward this desired impact that you see on this orange box, is that women and girls experience an increased sense of self-worth, so intrinsic empowerment, an ability to determine their own choices, and the right to influence social change for themselves and others. This program includes interventions for individuals and households. It includes school-based interventions, particularly in partnership with Sesame Workshop. I'm really excited that the Girl Talk program that Kim shared about is actually going to be scaled up into 3 more countries. It's already in Zimbabwe, so we'll be able to scale it up into 3 new countries and really hope to create a more positive learning environment for girls. And then, of course, within the broader community and addressing social norms, including men and boys, working with key custodians of culture, faith leaders, etc. And it includes a very deeply embedded monitoring, evaluation, and learning approach. This is really a learning exercise for us as an organization, and we're happy to partner with Emory University as our learning partner here. So our learning approach includes not only just, the typical baseline, midline, endline activities, but we're also including formative assessments throughout the project to get deeper, more concentrated or contextual learning, doing process evaluation to test our implementation quality and participant satisfaction, and then also, of course, learning synthesis that we can hopefully feed back into our own programs and then also contribute toward the sector as a whole. So I'll stop there and pass over to Sheila from Emory to share with us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Christy. And so I will be wrapping up by talking about women's empowerment in WASH, progress towards filling a critical gap in measurement. So I'll be focusing specifically on measurement of empowerment. And as you can see from the many logos at the bottom of the slide here, I am representing of partners and collaborators who have contributed to this work. And so I want to start just by talking about how we define empowerment, because the previous speakers, many of us are talking about empowerment, but
We lose Sheila? Yeah, it's frozen for everyone.
Yes, we have some problems to hear you, Sheila. It seems you have some internet issue. Sheila. Sheila, do you hear us? Do you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, may just need to wait for her to jump back in.
Yeah, exactly. I think we can just move forward and go over the Padlet. And Christy, if you can share the Padlet, we will. And I just want to share with you, key participants. Just feel free to use the Padlet in order to inform which type of organization we have on this call, and also to answer the different questions we shared earlier. And Christy, if you can share your screen, that will be perfect. In order to answer the question, you just can click on the button and add your answers, And as you see, if you add your question, you will see the response directly on the dashboard. I just wanted to highlight the fact that all of the answers are anonymous, and it will allow us to have your opinions, your perspectives, as well your experience on gender issue. Feel free to put key ideas you have on these specific questions. Sydney already shared the Padlet link on the chat. If you have any problem, you can reach out directly to her. Okay. It seems that Sheila is back now, and also do not hesitate to put any question you have on the chat box. You can also write your question and just have to ask directly the question verbally if you want.
so sorry about that, and I hope that that it works better this time. My internet went out at, of course, the exact wrong moment. So as I was saying, I was going to now move into the next slide, which was a definition of empowerment, and the way that we define empowerment for our project, which I know people have many different conceptualizations. So I think it's important to provide our definition, is the expansion of choice and the strengthening of voice through the transformation of power relations, so women and girls have more control over their lives and futures. And this definition comes from the white paper that is cited at the bottom of the slide here, which also includes the conceptual framework that you're seeing on the slide of women and girls empowerment, which has 3 domains: resources, agency, and institutional structures, as well as several subdomains within each of those. And so you can see just by looking at this conceptual framework that the framework is, it includes many components of empowerment, which can make it quite complex to measure all of these different components, domains and subdomains of empowerment. And so that can be quite challenging. And so when we started thinking about how to measure these aspects of empowerment, we decided to start with a literature review to see what had been done already. Next slide, please. So our question was, what has already been done? What has already been measured in relation to empowerment in WASH? And so we did a literature review where you can see from the figure across the x-axis on the bottom, you can see the years up to 2020. And on the y-axis, you can see the number of articles that were published in the peer-reviewed academic literature, which is where we were focusing. And so we included 257 articles that had been published up until May of 2020. And you can see clearly how the number of publications increased over time, with the vast majority of articles being published in the last 10 or even really the last 5 or 2 years up until the end of our search. And so we can see that there is a growing interest in empowerment and WASH, but next slide, please. When we look at what was covered, we can see, in fact, there is a lot of literature covering all domains of agency, resources, agency, and institutional structures, all subdomains, and 2 subdomains that we identified that were new, privacy and freedom of movement, which were not in the original conceptual framework. The vast majority of the literature still focused on resources, and there was less on agency or institutional structures. Next slide, please. In addition, we found that the conceptualization and definition of empowerment was limited and inconsistent. So in the figure, you're seeing that of the 257 articles, 52% of them, or 133 articles, used the word empowerment somewhere in the article, but only 7% or 17 articles actually defined or included a conceptualization of empowerment. So people were talking about empowerment, but they were talking about it in a way that was vague or inconsistent. And so we identified this need for a clear and consistent use of the term empowerment and measures of empowerment in WASH research. Next slide, please. We also identified that where there are, while there was a lot of research on empowerment in general, there was very little on WASH programs and how WASH programs may be related to empowerment. You can click again, please, Christy. The other gap that we identified was that while people were measuring empowerment in some ways, the measures that they were using had not been rigorously validated. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. Next slide, please. So probably we're all on the same page about this, but measuring empowerment is really critical for a lot of reasons. We need to measure empowerment to be able to assess and document differences between populations or across geographies, to identify populations or geographic areas to prioritize for our interventions. We need to be able to assess differences between domains or subdomains of empowerment to see if some aspects of empowerment are stronger or weaker, so that again, we can prioritize. And then we want to be able to evaluate the impact of our interventions over time and between program and non-program areas. Next slide, please. So when we talk about validated measures, the definition of validity is the degree to which an instrument measures what it is supposed to measure. If you can click again, please, Christy, click twice, please. Thank you. So when we talk about validity, an instrument can be reliable, but not valid, which means it's measuring something very consistently that is not at all what it's supposed to measure. It can be neither reliable nor valid, which means we have very little idea what it's actually measuring, but we want an instrument that is valid and reliable, that consistently measures what it is supposed to measure. Next slide, please, Christy. So the goal of our project was to fill this gap by creating and validating survey tools to measure women's sanitation-related empowerment in urban areas. Next slide. You can click 3 times, please, Christy. Yeah, that's good. So I won't go through all of these, all the details of these boxes, but I want to emphasize that developing and validating tools like this can be quite complex and quite a lengthy process. So we started in October 2018, almost 4 years ago, and have gone through this multi-phase process of developing the tools and collecting data in an iterative way, and then going through the process of validation. So next slide, please. So this map is showing the 8 cities where we have collected data now across parts of Asia and Africa. And so you can see that we have tried to be quite comprehensive in representing different contexts. And we've collected data in 2 of these cities, in Trichy and Kampala, twice now, and in all of the other cities once in the most recent phase of data collection. Next slide, please. And so through the work that we've done so far, we've been able to validate 16 scales and 6 indices. So we have standalone scales for each of the subdomains that you're seeing here. They can be used independently or together. And Christy, click one more time, please. There are optional add-ons focused on menstruation. So we have the scales, and then the scales don't include questions about menstruation because we want them to be applicable to all women, but there are optional questions that can be added on menstruation. And then the black dots indicate that there's also an index available to measure women's actual experiences in addition to their perceptions related to those subdomains. Next slide, please. So just to give you a quick glimpse into one of the data points that can come out of these, the surveys, the bar charts that you're seeing here are from the 2 indices related to decision-making, one for household level decision-making and one for community level decision-making. And so you can see this is from the first round of data collection that we did in Trichy and Kampala. Trichy is in blue, Kampala is in red, that in both cities, there was a high percentage of women who reported that they were involved in decision-making related to sanitation within their households. However, in the second set of bar charts, you can see that those numbers are much lower when it comes to community level decision-making, again, specific to sanitation. Next slide, please. So again, very quickly to show how one of our partners has been able to use the data, KCCA, the Kampala Capital City Authority, then use those numbers showing the lower involvement of women in community level decision-making to start developing initiatives to promote women's decision-making. So they established women's forums, they started doing trainings, again, to encourage women's decision-making at the community level based on the data that we had produced together. Next slide, please. So again, that's just one example, but I'm very happy to answer additional questions and want to acknowledge all of our many partners, the women who participated in the research, and our funder, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Next slide, please, Christy. Thank you. This has our contact information, and again, we welcome questions and inquiries about the tools. I believe I was the last speaker, and so now I will pass back to Sophie.
Thanks a lot, Sheila, and thanks a lot to all speakers. And as you see, it seems that many action and initiatives are put in place in order to address gender empowerment, you know. And in terms of main key takeaways, what we can highlight is that women's voice count, and also every voice counts. We just have to create safe space for women and vulnerable people. And also data is needed in order to better advocate on women empowerment, as Sheila highlighted during the presentations. And also we need a mindset shift at all levels, research level, technology level, and also at the policy level. And we need to have more integrated activities. The WASH sector have to work in direct contact with other sectors like the health sector, education, nutrition, and others. And also we need to put women, girls, and vulnerable persons at the center of all WASH activities. And I think the main things that we can highlight at the end of all of these things is that women empowerment is possible, but we really need to have key data and key information, and to ensure that we hear the voice of women and vulnerable people. I just want to go over the key answer we have on the Padlet. The first one is from Sarin Malik, and she said that leading on the Sex for Water programs in Kenya. She shared one example, and addressing issues of sextortion and SGBV in WASH. In addition to the usual empowerment initiatives, we added psychosocial support services, doctors and counselors in the safe space programs was designed with SGBV experts to support the victims and survivors, but this has now led to addressing women and girl general mental health matters in the communities, addressing the distress that poverty brings, the root cause of this dispowerment, helping them find their voice and courage, but also building coping mechanism and resilience. We have found this to be a powerful approach. Really agree with you, Sarin, and I think you highlight a great example. I just wanted to have Pamela's comments on the specific things, knowing that WaterAid are implementing similar action in Africa. Pamela, over to you. If you can comment Sarin point.
Okay, thank you very much. I think for us, in terms of what we have been doing, like I indicated, a lot of the work we have really been partnering with other organizations that we believe have more capacity and are rooted in the communities where we work to support implementation. I think one of the challenges that we have seen is being able to address offshoots from some of the work that we have been doing, and the example of the legal help desks. While we know that there is a referral sort of service and system in place, some of the services are not necessarily readily available. So that has posed a bit of a challenge for us because, we still have the women coming back. They are supported up to a certain point, but beyond that, the connection to other services is not really made. And so for us, that's an area that we want to work with across sectors and with other actors to see how we can make the connections in terms of being able to access support when it is required by the women. So one of the things that we have also learned is that we really need to look at the entire value chain, if you like, of how we are able to support these women and the communities, and to see whether other support that will be required will be available and the women will be able to access the support that they require. So it's still a little bit, in the early stages for us in terms of doing this work. And we are learning from the work that we are currently doing. And we hope to address some of the gaps that we have noted as we have been implementing this. But at the end of the day, I think what we have been able to see is that we cannot address WASH issues when there are a lot of other issues that these communities, particularly the women, face and expect, their lives to change. We might improve one component, they have access, but I think one of the things that we see is that they are not able to sustain access for various reasons, including reasons of violence, safety, in accessing these services and so forth. So we have to have a bit more of a holistic approach to address the other challenges. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Pamela, for sharing these key points. We also have one question on the Padlet. I think one person asked the question that how can we include key yet overlooked enablers to women empowerment in WASH? Example, having a donkey to carry water. I really want to have Madeline and Christy answer on that. Madeline, over to you.
Thank you, Sophie. I think that, what we aim to do in our programming is certainly meet each community and each women where they are, and specifically, addressing each community's cultural and specific needs. And so in a specific community where maybe that is the primary way in which water is delivered, looking for opportunities to leverage existing income generating opportunities, potentially for donkey carts to carry water. I think that would be a perfect, opportunity to explore for to combine water access and empowerment. Looks like there's also another comment to a follow-up comment. I'm not sure if that's. Oh, it looks okay. Sorry, it says that's from Anna Mary Brooke. And they work with rural livestock owning communities in 13 countries. Thank you for providing that additional context. Certainly, as I noted, meeting communities where they are specifically when it comes to their specific type of water service delivery, but also exploring additional opportunities to look at sustainable agriculture and combining rural livestock in terms of WASH as well is important. Christy, anything else to add there?
Yeah, I'll just build on your excellent point, Madeline. Thank you. Within the program, I shared a little bit about World Vision is using an approach called Empowered Worldview, which is a model we created that is sort of an initial community engagement step where we really work with communities to unpack what resources they have that they can use. So I think that would be a situation in which we would, rather than, what can we bring to you and give to you, it's also what do you already have that you can use that can help address some of these challenges you've identified for yourself. And that really is that effort to really try to identify what is already existing in the community that's a tool that could be used differently or appreciated in a different way or used in a different way that can help contribute to alleviating some of these burdens and barriers. So that's one of the efforts we're making to try to identify some of those opportunities maybe in the communities where that you highlighted.
Thanks a
Sophie,
lot.
do you
Yes.
mind if I jump in with one additional thought on that question?
Yes, you can go.
Thank you, Sophie. I thought that was a great question. And I wanted to also add that the resources that communities and households and individuals may have may not only be material. The example was about a donkey to carry water. There may also be people who could help, men and boys who could help with a task that is traditionally a woman's or girl's task. And there are sort of, when we think about the enablers to women's empowerment, there are also the intangible sort of psychological aspects of empowerment, simply the awareness of inequalities in gendered roles, and sort of the confidence in one's ability to speak up about those inequalities are also enablers of empowerment. So I think it's also important to consider those. That was a great question, and thank you, Sophie, for allowing me to add.
Thanks a lot, Sheila. Thanks a lot. I saw many links that people shared. If you can share it on the chat box, that would be perfect. And Sarin, if I can invite you to share verbally what you put on the chat box. I think you highlight key main points in terms of the lack of laws that are gender responsive based on your experience. I really want to have your point of view on that, and if you can share key key highlights that would be perfect. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Excellent presentations, very enlightening, and you're right on the use of empowerment. Absolutely. And this also goes to Pamela, but also to the community here present. You will find, yes, more blockages, mostly at the legal, or from a legal standpoint. So we analyzed quite a number of laws, mostly that had to do with sexual offenses, water, and everything, and found that the component of sextortion was actually non-existent. And this is where you find additional blockages, because you may have those legal help desks, but they will equally come to a wall if the law is not there. What are we charging against exactly? And this was really the case over here, where the police are like, okay, this has happened, but you know, which law am I using exactly? It's not there. So these are equally some of the challenges that keep coming up. So on our end, we had to go ahead and develop the sextortion bill with the Attorney General's office. And of course, we were told that, you know, you need to bring more evidence from other sectors, because the evidence in the water sector had been collected and endorsed and validated. But this is happening in health, in education, in jobs, you name it. But with the legal teams, we said this will serve to inspire, and then just bring other experts and, you know, have this bill go through. So it's important that we also look at the legislation in the countries. Most of the time you'll find that they're not gender responsive and they do not respond to women empowerment. Thank you, Sophie.
Thanks a lot, Sahin. And I just invite both of you, Sahin and Pamela, if you can have after discussion on that and share it with us, that would be perfect in order to frame the final report of this discussion. Great contribution, Sahin. Just let me introduce Madhu. She will just to summarize what we said during this 1 hour discussion and highlight the key main takeaways we can have. Madhu, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sophie. And I've really enjoyed listening to what has been a very, very rich discussion on how we can all work together to promote more gender inclusive and transformative approaches to WASH. And I'm sure the audience has enjoyed it as well, and some very, very key takeaways to take away from today. So I'll try and summarize. I know I don't have long, so I'll do my best, but you know, I'm sure the points are very extensive to take away. So I think we are all aligned that there are extensive benefits to the greater community when women and girls have access to WASH. Some of the key points that I've heard are that we really need programs that empower girls at a critical development moment in their journey when they're most likely to fall out of the education system, especially around the puberty age. We also need to destigmatize menstruation. That will help reduce school absenteeism. And we can do this by practical knowledge and confidence building. We heard that there is a need to advocate for WASH as a pathway for gender equality. So there is a link between the different sustainable development goals, as we saw with WaterAid's work on feminist international assistance policy. We heard that it's important to provide safe spaces at WASH access points for women and girls, as we saw in the example from the Zambia project. And that mirrors the findings of the ripple effect study that Global Water Challenge spoke about, which found 32% of women reported a decrease in community harassment of women due to improved water access. So addressing or seeing WASH as a way to reducing violence and harassment of women, violence against women and harassment of women is key. We saw that the involvement of women and girls is critical to the success and sustainability of WASH investments, and we need allies. We need both sexes to participate in gender-sensitive approaches. We heard that women have greater decision-making in households versus in the community. So involving women in community-level decision-making is very important. We also heard the need for solid, high-quality data and reporting. And we know that this is a complex issue. We know the data is hard to come by, but it can be done. And it's critical to generating very useful insights and knowledge that will form the foundation of future programs and policies. We heard from GETF, Global Water Challenge, about the ripple effect study that the Coca-Cola Foundation was proud to have been involved in, and we at Coca-Cola have embedded in our own 2030 strategy and work on WASH programs. We heard about the impact of WASH on women's empowerment and the 8 pathways, of which for me personally, the time-saving element really stands out because that is key to women and girls' economic empowerment. From Wash Up, Girl Talk, we heard about the participatory design and community buy-in and how critical it is to ensuring the success of WASH projects. I really liked the example around the mother support groups. The power of multimedia and Muppets to talk about uncomfortable topics was also important, and we need to bring those uncomfortable topics to the forefront and get comfortable with them so that we can begin to change some of the underlying issues. So it's very important to create the space for boys and women to actively support programming. We heard WaterAid again talk about the risk of gender-based violence, which is a theme that's come up more than once. And also early marriages and the need for partners to address challenges that go beyond WASH. Some of these are systemic societal challenges that need to be addressed. For example, by setting up legal help desks and communal water facilities. So those were some of the key points, but I've got a few more. If I have time, I'd love to go through those. We heard that there are 5 domains of change that are needed for greater gender equality and inclusion, particularly around access, decision-making, participation, and systems and well-being. And I thought for me, that really summarized very effectively what some of the key decision gateways were for mobilizing change. It was also very interesting. I really liked this quote, which was around the expansion of choice and the strengthening of voice through transformation of power relations is critical to women's empowerment. You know, the expansion of choice and strengthening of voice particularly resonated with me. One of the panelists emphasized the need for measuring empowerment. That is critical, and like someone said, data is hard to come by, but if you measure empowerment, then it's easier to build a business case and then build that into future programming and encourage other organizations to do that as well. We must go beyond the norm of providing access and lean into transformative approaches using new thinking, new investment, and intentional learning. And this is really, truly important in the corporate sector as well. I'd just like to add a couple of points from our perspective at Coca-Cola. We have collaborated with organizations like WaterAid and the Global Water Challenge to understand and meet the needs of women and girls and to systematically embed some of the learnings and measure gender-related outcomes in our own WASH programming. Coca-Cola has also worked with WaterAid and Diageo to develop a guidance for companies and NGOs to integrate gender considerations into WASH programming, and the guidance we heard is being launched hopefully later this week. The guidance specifically explains why companies should invest in WASH and why in gender programming, and why an integrated approach to WASH and gender equality and women's empowerment projects is important. It sets out what approaches are needed to integrate gender equality and women's empowerment into WASH projects, and it also shares an overview of the principles that are relevant and how, it focuses on the how of the implementation as well. So we're really hopeful that the guidance will help companies work with NGO partners to turn their strategic commitments around gender into WASH, to turn their strategic commitments on gender and WASH into reality. And we'll get better integrated projects with more sustainable outcomes. Finally, I'd like to conclude by just saying that moving beyond a sole focus on access to WASH means demonstrating good water quality supply practice, encouraging behavior change, and protecting water sources. Let's use what we've all learned here together. It's been a really, really enriching session to drive transformational change. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Madhu, and thanks to all of the presenters and all of the participants. I think we had today a very rich discussion on the importance of understanding the context of intervention, the importance of taking into account the aspect related to mental health, the importance of having quality data, the importance of putting vulnerable people at the center of our intervention in general, but especially the importance of listening and understanding the needs of vulnerable people. All of this by implementing multi-sectorial approach and also by implementing innovative approach. I just want to thank the organizer. It was a pleasure for me to moderate this session. The recording will be available a few weeks after the end of the World Water Week, and hoping to have again this type of discussion platform. Excellent day or evening, depending on where you are. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll post follow-up documents in the Pathable platform for everyone. Thank you.